So there are a ton of games to help you learn Japanese on the Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS, particularly helping you learn kanji thanks to the nifty stylus that the 3DS and the DS has to help you with your writing. However, trying to navigate through all of the games that have been released on the DS and 3DS is near impossible unless you do some heavy research. So in this video, I've broken down all of the games that are worth caring about, and I'm going to show you guys the top 5 games that you guys should keep on your radar if you want to use the DS or 3DS to help you learn Japanese. So really simply put, there are a ton of these games that you don't have to worry about at all because they're actually just old versions of the same game. For example, there's Kanji DS 1, 2, 3 Deluxe, Training, Training 2, and all of these games are made by the same studio, Rocket, also known recently as Imagineer. The company's actually changed that's taking care of this series. So really simply put, the DS1 version is just the really basic version. It has the least amount of content and the least amount of helpful tests and vocabulary and sentences and example sentences and extras to help you learn kanji. So I've gone through and researched all of the games, and the main difference is that Kanken 1 has 25,000 test questions, right, taken from tests to help you there, just example sentences, right? Whereas number 2 has 44,000 and number 3 Deluxe has 116,000. So clearly, if you're wanting to pick between one of these, you'd go with number 3 because it has the most number of questions. Not only that, but the first game only covers up to Nikkyu, which is grade 2 in the Kanken. Just to explain very quickly, the Kanken is a test in Japan that most school students take to test their kanji ability, both with vocabulary, reading, writing. It's a very, very useful test, and it's quite an interesting one for you guys to use to actually help you write kanji, because you can use the material that school kids here in Japan use to actually help them write kanji. Well, you can use the same thing as well. Now, there are 10 levels, the easiest being number 10, the hardest being number 1. Most people actually stop around 2 or 3. That's kind of the end of high school, university, right? Number 1 is actually bigger than the entire test. Just number 1 by itself is bigger than the rest of the whole test. And number 1 is actually split into 2 sections, pre-1 and 1, and they are really just for the super kanji maniacs who want to learn all of these super rare kanji that you might see people quiz about on like TV shows and stuff. No one needs to know these kanji, but they're just more about, you know, the ego boost. Actually, in history, only 3 people, non-Japanese, have actually passed level 1. It's that rare. So generally speaking, you don't need to worry about that level. Level 3 to 2, that's probably what you want to aim for if you want to be on the same level as the Japanese person. So it doesn't really matter that the first game in the series only covers up to grade 2, whereas the second and the third game cover all the way up to level 1, the highest. Doesn't really matter too much. I think what is really useful though is the number of questions. The 3 Deluxe has 116,000 example questions. That's a lot of variety. It's going to give you a lot of reading practice. It's really useful. The way these games work is that it's all based around getting you ready for the test. Now, what does that mean for you as a learner? Well, you can study certain parts. For example, if you want to just learn how to do writing or reading or stroke count or whatever, you can choose that and focus just on that. And if you want, that's all the game is. You can just practice how to read all of the kanji with all of the vocab and all of the readings that is existing in the Kanken, which is really good for you because you can go way beyond the scopes of the JLPT and learn a whole bunch of language that native Japanese people would know. So that's cool, but then you can also do practice tests, which is anywhere between, I think, 10 minutes to 40 minutes, and you can actually take a mini test. And if you want, you could actually study the entire, everything that you learn in the Kanken, and you can actually try and 100% everything, which is really cool because then you feel this sense of accomplishment, and you can actually kind of see where your level is comparing to actual native Japanese people, because it does cover all of the stuff that they learn in school. So it's pretty cool, right? So that's generally how these first 3 games go on the DS. And they've been re-released on the 3DS, except they've just been rebranded as Kanken Training 3DS, and Kanken Training 2 3DS. So I actually used Kanken Training 1 myself personally with my own Japanese learning journey, and I used that here on my 3DS, and I got up to about the 6th level, and I just played this. We can see that I've played for 125 hours, and I've just been, doing that. I haven't done that in a few years, but when I was really crazy with my studies, that's what I used to do, just for fun. It really did help get familiar with the kanji, stroke order. I could almost always guess the actual order of the strokes, even for kanji I've never seen before, thanks to just doing that game a bunch. It also helps you with familiarity, and you pick up a ton of vocabulary that is not covered at all in the JLPT. So it's nice to have this kind of testing video game. In terms of the 3DS versions, how many test questions they have, they actually stopped publishing how many questions. So we finished at 116,000 for the 3rd game on DS. Apparently the 3DS version has even more than that, and then apparently the 2nd version of the 3DS actually has double the 1st version. So, we're looking at potentially, several 100,000 questions in these games, but nothing officially has been released. Now, these games are quite useful. You can study the particular thing you want to study, you can do practice tests, and that's really where it's all about. Now, you can actually have a personal list, especially in the newer ones, where you, for example, if there's a word you're having trouble with, you can put a check mark on, and that will add it to your personal list so you can study that by itself. The games also offer dictionaries, so you can look up the kanji and see how it's written with stroke order and things like that, and also, the readings. And some of them have mini games and tracing and stuff like that to help you with writing. Generally speaking, though, the newer version has the best of everything. Now, these are cool games, and I enjoyed playing them for quite a while, and they're definitely good for you to use, and I definitely recommend if you want to pick up one, then grab the ones on the 3DS because they're just the most polished. However, that being said though, they're not my personal favorite kanji games on the DS. They're very good, but they're not actually my personal favorite. So the reason why is because when you're studying, you don't actually get to see how much progress you've made in each particular area. So you can't see, have you studied all of the readings or not? You cannot see that. All you get is a percentage score for the entire level. And that's actually not great for you if you don't care about writing at all. If you just want to learn the readings for kanji, how are you supposed to know when you're finished? And that is a downside to these games because it only shows you 100%, 0% how much you've covered, and this actually makes it really, really challenging for you to know when you're done. For example, I put in over 100 hours on my 3DS game, and here, even for the level 10, I was unable to get it to 100%. It's stuck at 99% because I don't know what area am I missing? What haven't I studied yet? It's not clear. So that is a potential downside for this game where you can't actually keep a record of everything you've learnt and what you need to cover if you want to get to 100%. There is a kind of chart where you can see your strengths and weaknesses, but it's not very good. It's not very accurate, so it's just kind of there. So that's the first type of game and the most common type of game. You've probably already seen this if you've seen any kanji game for the DS. This is probably the one that you've come across. But actually, it's not the best. But if you want to just remember, what is this type, the one that's very similar to this, very similar layout and everything, just remember the company that is Rocket or Imagineer. If you see those logos on the front cover of the game, then you know that is the style that this game is. The next style, though, is actually my personal favorite, and this is made by the IE Institute, which is a separate company, and they've just done their own take on how to do the kanken. This one I actually like a lot more. So this company, IE Institute, started in 2006 with Tokoton Kanji no, and then progressed with the 47,000. The names are very, very long. I'm just going to call it the 47,000 version. You can see because it has the really big writing for 47,000. And these games were okay. It was kind of their first attempts, and they're quite messy. Some things are good about them, some things are bad about them. They're okay if you see them on a bargain bin, but actually, I really recommend the final 2 games that this company made. One of them is released in 2009, and it's kind of the premium edition. You can see that here written with the premium, very big, very clear premium. And the other one is completely different design, and it's just the Kanken DS Training. Not to be confused with Kanken Training 3DS. It gets really confusing. Just remember, if you see this IE Institute logo, you know that that's the company and they do a completely different style to the Rocket style. Now, these two games, the premium one and the Kanji DS training, are really good for you, particularly as a learner of Japanese that isn't necessarily super interested on, just cramming for the test, but maybe you just want to learn Japanese. Why? Because the way these games are focused on is that individual study, not just taking the whole test and learning it by practicing and cramming over and over and over again. This game actually allows you to super focus on just individual parts that you want to learn, and it gives you a progression bar for that part. None of the other companies for the Kanken, the Rocket games, don't do that. They just do it for the whole Kanken level, 0 to 100%. But this game, the one from IE Institute, actually shows you for every individual area. So stroke order, writing, reading within an actual example sentence, all kinds of stuff. You can choose whatever you want and you can just focus on that and level that 0 to 100. And when you're at 100, you're finished and you can move on to the next level. So this game already is much better, in my opinion, for helping you learn Japanese because you can choose what you want to study. Now, deciding which one is the best for you is really up to your personal preference. So I'm going to start with the older one from 2009, the premium one. This is my personal favorite game for learning kanji with on any platform. The reason why is because this game actually does an incredible job at actually teaching you the kanji just like you would learn at school, taking it much slower but much more thoroughly. So for example, here at the very top you have learning kanji. So if you choose the top one, you can practice writing kanji, and it's really cool the way this game approaches writing kanji, because first it starts with just a simple trace the kanji, and then it gradually gets rid of its kind of training wheels, and eventually you're writing it by yourself. So this is a really good thing that none of the other games do. None of the other games do that. Every other game just expects you to know how to write, and if you don't, you should remember it next time. Whereas this game actually teaches you first how to do it, and that is so good. Also, it's so detailed, it's so well made. This game is really premium. It really does live up to the name premium. So as we can see here, for example, I've just been playing for a couple of minutes and we can see that at the very lowest level, we have the kanji here for the lowest level, the level 10. And we can see that the kanji here are all the ones that are for this level, and they're actually color-coded based on how well you know them. So for example, here I have Ichi for 1 as green. That means I already know it fine, and we can see that it's actually marked as something that I know. This is really cool because you can actually choose personally. Let's say right now, you've already been studying Japanese for quite a couple of years and you don't need to practice the 1 kanji, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Well, you can pick the kanji that you don't want to learn, and then you can press this Y button and it will just turn it onto automatic "you've learnt it" mode. So you can actually choose to skip this when you do later practice tests if you want. Or you can still practice it whenever you want. Even if you've mastered it, you actually get an option that gets asked every time you do a test. So this is really, really cool. You can see very nice readings of the actual reading for the onyomi, the kunyomi, what radical it uses. Not only that, it even has example sentences. So if you have a look down where it has the X button, the first one here we can see the display, but if we change it to examples, then it actually has an example sentence. So this is really cool because it gives you reading practice. None of the other ones give this nice layout and very clean instructions for how to write. You can also then click on the kanji and you can practice it. Now, the way it teaches you this kanji is really cool. So just like in a school book at Japanese school, you would be writing the kanji over and over and over again, right? Well, it's the same thing here, but actually in the game, and it helps you through that process. So here we can see after 10 tries, and you want to follow the stroke order. So this is really good because it teaches you how to write first. Then you do it again. One more time with the tracing, but this time the stroke order is not shown to you. Again, 2 more times without the stroke order being shown. And now finally you have to write it all on your own. So you've already written it like 5 times, you've got a bunch of practice, and now you're ready to write it by yourself. Once you've finished, you've now learnt the kanji. Now, this is really simple, But none of the other games do this to help introduce you to the kanji. This does, and that makes it so incredible for helping you write. It makes it much more smoother for you as a learner to go through this process, and it could even help you with school, for example, if you have any tests where you need to learn how to write kanji. Now, once you've practiced all of the kanji for the level that you want to do, then you can do writing problems or reading problems, so you can test your ability to write or your ability to read. And again, it's really nicely sectioned here with just 5 kanji at a time. So you're just focusing on these 5 kanji. As I said, you can choose to skip the kanji if you want, or just do them all together. And then you're tested how to write it in a sentence. Now, if for example you don't know how to write one of them, the really cool thing about this game is it has a hint button. None of the other games have this function either. So if you press the hint button, you can actually get a little bit of a tease. So here now we have the kanji outline. So if you want, you can now do it for getting a little bit of points in your progress. So you don't just get a flat 0, you're wrong, like the other games do. Now it's like, oh, well, you don't know it, but at least now you get some practice writing it. It gives you a bunch of options, so you can try it again, you can do the same questions, you can fix your mistakes, and you can even have a look at your results. So already, just looking at how to write kanji, this game is really helpful in guiding you through that process. The other games have 0 of that, no help whatsoever. It's just, do you know how to write ichi? No? Well, bump, you got it wrong. This is ichi. Remember next time. Whereas this game actually guides you through the process first. And that's why personally it's my favorite. You still have tests just like the other ones, so you can test yourself with your level and try and pass a test so you can actually kind of graduate. And you can level up the particular thing that you want to learn. For example, you can write the correct word in the middle of a sentence, or you can just select the correct word in the middle of a sentence. So rather than writing, if you just want to learn how to read, you can just use these ones where it says sentaku. Just do that, and that'll help you with your reading skills. Perhaps you don't care at all about writing, well, you can do that here. And as you guys can see, there's a lovely breakdown of all of the things you've done. For example, you've answered these correct 2% of the time, you've answered them incorrect 0% of the time, and you still haven't seen 98%. So this shows you exactly what you need to do if you want to progress to learn everything. This is perfect. So you, with this game, can cover everything if you want, or only the things you want. Also, the way that it shows you your total progress blows the other games out of the water. Have a look at this. We have a pie chart of all of the kanji that we've learnt so far for level 10. We can see how well we know it and how many we haven't seen yet. So that's way more detailed than the other games. You can also have a look at the record of your testing, so you can see how well you've been doing and how much time you've been spending testing recently. And you can even have a look at your history of your actual ability tests when you're actually trying to, test your level based on how much you've practiced and see if you've improved in your level. We have a history of that as well. And even more than that, there's also at the very bottom, the Tokoton Yomikaki. This is just like random stuff that just is thrown at you as kind of like a test. So that's another way that you can just kind of get not so focused tests, but just random. This game is incredible, it really is. At any time you can choose your level here in the menu, you can choose how fast it recognizes your kanji strokes, you can turn on and off the music and all that kind of thing. It's very customizable. So I personally love this one because it teaches you how to write. The more newer version, DS Training, by the exact same company, this one gets rid of some of the premium features, but just really summarizes it down into a nice, neat package. This is a much neater experience. The character doesn't get in your way, she's just there talking and you can ignore her if you want. Now we have Mainichi Kanken, so this is a little bit different. It's very much the same thing that we saw before with the numbers, the progression, the same kind of selections, whether you want to practice your writing skills or your reading, but it's just a little bit clearer, right? We can see this pen just to show you, whether it's writing. We have a star system, so you can see how much you've progressed, whether you're, 1 star, 2 star, or 3 stars. So that's mostly the same as the previous game. It's just formatted formatted a little bit differently. This time though, you cannot just go through your kanji list and, do the drilling of your writing. This time instead you kind of have a dictionary. It's a little bit more boring. But you can look up the kanji based on level or how to read it or stroke count, or you can even search for them. So this is more like a dictionary this time. For some people this might be better, for other people it might be worse. So for example, you can have a look at all the kanji for number 10. We have ichi here just like before. We can see the onyomi and the kunyomi readings, and we have some example sentences. The nice one about this is that you actually have multiple example sentences, so you can see it using a different reading, right? So it's not just that same reading. For example, here with one ichi, we can see ichime, so one person, and then we also see hitotsu for one thing. So it's nice seeing those example sentences. You can click on the Renshu button, which is practice. However, there is no overlay to kind of help you work through it. It just kind of expects that you know. So for example, right here, ichi, write it. Even the stroke order you can't see, right? So this is much harder for you, especially if you're coming in completely fresh and you've never learnt Japanese before. Then you're like, how do I write that? What's the stroke order? I don't know. This game doesn't really do a very good job at teaching you. There are practice tests in this game as well, and this game also features a much nicer progression, although not as detailed as the premium version. Here we just see an overall percentage of my progression. It's still better than the Kanken series from Rocket. So with these two games, the premium version and then the Kanken DS training, you can see that they're very similar, and so it really ultimately comes up to what you prefer more, right? The premium has more to it, right? It's much more helpful in the way that it teaches you the kanji and the stroke order and things, but if you're not really interested in that, then perhaps the other one might be better, just the DS training. So that's it for IE Institute, and you can see that the best two games are definitely the premium and the DS training. So this style of game is very different to the first one, where the Kanken is much more about just taking big tests or just focusing on learning something, but you can't really see your progress. Whereas IE Institute's game is much more clear on your progress, and it's not so focused on taking the big long tests, but it's more focused on individual areas that you want to study. So now moving on to something a little bit different. Here we have Kageyama method, Tadashi Kanji Kakitori-kun. This is very clear from its cover, right? The blue and the chicken are very stand out. So one way this game really excels first up that's very different from the others is it actually has furigana. So that makes it really nice for you if perhaps you don't know how to read kanji already, right? This really is more aimed at a younger audience in Japan, but this helps you as a learner because furigana is super useful. Now, one thing this game offers that none of the other games offer is it actually gives you practice writing hiragana and katakana. Instead of focusing on the Kanken, it's more focused on your grade level at school. So you can focus your study based on whether you're ichinensei all the way up to high school. This game has a really nice feeling brush. When you write, it feels like you're writing with an actual pen. It actually kind of thins off at the edges and feels more like a brush stroke. It's not just this digital black line. It's got a really nice feel to it. This is great because it actually helps you with your writing, and it even grades your writing based on how well you space it together and write it and stuff. So this is really cool for if you want to learn how to write hiragana, katakana, and perhaps you want to get the more beautiful handwriting. This game is quite useful for that. Another really cool thing is because of the furigana, it makes it really accessible. The problem is though that it actually starts at level 8. It does include stuff for level 10 and 9, but the actual examples, like straight up when you want to start testing yourself, you actually start at level 8, which is a little bit difficult for you guys because if you haven't learned how to write the first 2 levels of Kanken and it just being chucked in together with 8, like for example in this example sentence, we have some kanji that are quite simple, but others that are a little bit more difficult. The cool thing is though, I really like how it's very, very easy to read with the furigana. It's very clear, it's very simple, it's got a nice format. A cool thing about this game is when you have something wrong, it'll actually like mark your score, and you can actually practice writing that kanji until you're happy with the results. The game also has tests, so you can do a whole test to kind of test your level and, you know, go through the whole time test with many different questions, testing on many different things. So this game is okay, right? It's not my favorite. It's nice, and its real strengths lie in the fact that it has furigana and it teaches you how to actually write in terms of, you know, stroke and prettiness and you know, the spacing and everything, and it teaches you hiragana and katakana, which you need for all the other games. If you don't know how to write hiragana and katakana, it might be quite difficult to answer the questions in the other games, whereas this game you can actually learn how to do it with this game. That being said though, it's not too difficult to pick up hiragana and katakana. The other games will give you a ton of practice. Next we have a really interesting game that I only just recently discovered. Here, Ukkari o Nakuso. Bunsho Yomi Training. This is a really interesting game. Seriously, this covers things that no other game does. So this game also has furigana, which is really nice. It makes it much easier to read all of the kanji and the explanations. You have a little bit of like a level test when you first start. And then some interesting thing is every time you actually start for the beginning of your day, you get like a random select thing to be tested on. Now, this game does something that no other games do. It teaches you grammar. I am so impressed by this. If you're having problems with particles, wa, ga, ni, o, de, this game will help you with those particles. If you're having problems with understanding sentences, this game will help you from the very ground up. So, for example, if we take this example sentence. Watashi wa enpitsu something motsu. Is it o motsu, ga motsu, or ni motsu? So this is really good because it tests your understanding. This is something no other game has. So because it's motsu and we're doing something to the object, it's o. Yay! Nice. So we can see that it actually helps teach you particles. It even teaches you where to put a comma in a sentence. You search for simple words in the middle of jumbled sentences. That's fun. Another really cool thing about this game is when you're learning the words, you can actually have a look at example sentences if you want. So for example, here with this word, I'm not too sure, so I can click on the explanation button and then it will show me a breakdown using an example sentence. When you're doing grammar and particles and things, it'll even give you an explanation of why it's used. You can pick words from a list that don't belong with the other words, and a huge range of other types of ways to help you learn how to read Japanese. This game is aimed at actually helping kids learn how to read Japanese. Perhaps they're having problems understanding and conceptualizing the sentences and breaking it all down, so this game actually walks you through that entire process. So this game is really good for helping you grasp a more fundamental understanding of the language, starting from a low level, from more of like a kid foundation, not really studying for a test, but just learning Japanese in general. A really cool and useful game. And the final game on this list is actually the newest of all of these games, and this is for the 3DS, and this is Tanoshiku Omoshiroku Kanken Shougakusei. So this, as we can see with the cute little guy with the 10 on his head, this is the newest game out of any Kanken game, and this is quite impressive. You may have noticed already, but this game is voice acted. So this cute little bunny rabbit guy, he actually voice acts all of the instructions and questions, like what do you want to do? Like here, what will you do? You know, make a selection by touching what you want to do. That's all voice acted. There is one downside though. His sentences end with maru. That's his catchphrase. That's often what you'll see in Japanese language, the very end of the sentence being the character's catchphrase, like Naruto has datebayo and stuff. Well, here he has maru, as his name is Ichimaru, 10. So this is his catchphrase. So you hear maru, 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 maru over and over again. That's one potential downside to this. But it is really cool that it's a voice-acted Kanken game. So first up, we have three options: Kanken, Kanji Museum, and Kanji Zanmai. And this is actually very similar to all of the other Kanken games that we've come across previously. You can look at your results from previous tests, you can look up kanji and learn the stroke order, you can also practice with example questions from the actual test. And so this allows you to study whatever section that you want, whether you want to learn just reading, whether you want to learn stroke order, whether you want to learn how to write, you can choose whatever you want to do. This game only covers up to level 2, however, as I said previously, you only actually need level 2 to be on the same level as a Japanese person. You don't need to go any further beyond level 2, so this is totally fine if you want to just use this game to help you learn Japanese. Now, the crazy thing about this game is it's actually the most efficient in terms of your time, because when you do a practice test, you actually practice everything. So for example, here you can see there's 520 questions, right? So that's a ton of everything, right? So this is really cool because it's really efficient for you. You can just study whatever you want. You can stop at any time you want and then get your results. So that's quite nice. You don't have to keep on going through 5 at a time like my personal favorite premium game. This way it's much more efficient. Also, a nice little add bonus is you can actually see down below what age range best fits that particular level. As we can see here, for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5, we can see that that's all elementary school, shogaku. And then we have 4, 3 for middle school, 2 and 1 for high school and university. So this is nice to kind of help you visualize where you are in Japanese society. So that's really cool, right? You can practice just like normal for the Kanken, do practice tests, focus on what you want to study, and try and pass the level. One downside with this game, as you may have noticed, is there is no collection of data showing how much you've covered in terms of everything. You can see what your previous test was, you can see if you've passed a level, but you cannot see how much of the percentage you have covered. This makes it hard for you to be a completionist and go 100% like my personal favorite game, the premium game. This is not as useful if you want 100% everything. Which personally, I don't really mind too much about learning how to write kanji. Sure, it's nice in the beginning just to get a good feel for it, but it is a skill that you have to keep up, otherwise you're gonna forget over time. For example, I haven't written kanji in like, I don't know, 4 years or something. I've forgotten most of the kanken that I studied previously, but I still remember all the words that I learned, right? And that to me is more important, learning the vocabulary as well as getting a ton of reading practice. So for me personally, that's my focus when I'm playing these games, is improving my reading ability, knowing more vocabulary, and just getting a more natural speed at, learning things in the way that Japanese people learn. So you learn a whole bunch of culture and vocabulary and just, it's really useful in kind of getting to that same point where, a Japanese kid might be, right? Where, they're at a much higher level Japanese than you are, right? When they're only a couple of years old, right? And this game does give you a little bit of a peep in the window into that kind of way to attain that level. There's Kanji Zanmai, that's just random selection. So you get a quick random test of things and you can choose however many questions you want. This is just a fun little, quick little test, right? Just quickly test a whole bunch of stuff in a certain level, see how much you know. And then finally, there's this other mode, which is completely different to anything we've seen in any other game, and that's Kanji Museum. This is really interesting because this actually kind of goes through a whole bunch of different things. Like here, we have kind of ancient kanji, matching the ancient kanji to the current version. We have like reading tests. Do you know how to read this certain word? We have Yoji Jukugo collections, like a game of trying to pick one word that matches all different words to create Yoji Jukugo for all of them. Really interesting. We have Bara Bara mode, where you see parts of kanji and you have to kind of line them up and create a kanji, so you have to pick the right parts. Another Yoji Jukugo game where you want to create them in order to create a bridge so the monkeys can cross the river. There's even a game to help you learn all of the locations in Japan. Another really cool thing is when you actually progress in these game modes, you unlock this kind of professor lecture about little topics, and you can learn these little bits of information about the Japanese language themselves and even the origins of things. So this is really cool. As like a bonus unlock, you actually get to learn more deeper about the language. So I think this game is probably the most fun game, right? It definitely has a lot of fun elements with the voice acting and the games and clearly the presentation is quite nice, but it's just not the deepest. And that's it. You've now learned everything you need to know about all of the kanji games available on the Nintendo DS. So we've covered a whole bunch of games. We've gone through the whole Rocket Imagineer games, which are really focused on the tests. They're great, but they just don't allow you to see exactly what you haven't learnt yet, which makes it difficult for you if you want to 100% an area before moving on. But personally, that's what I like to do. I want to know that I know all of the 100% of all of the level 10 vocab before I then learn level 9 vocab, so I can progress in a kind of linear manner. These games don't unfortunately allow you, but they are really good games and they're really polished, especially the most recent one on 3DS, Kanken Training 2. They're actually the games that I used personally in my own history learning Japanese and practicing writing. So they are really good games. However, the other series made by IE Institute, I might actually prefer a little bit more now coming back at it with fresh eyes, because especially the premium game, it is so good in teaching you from the very beginning, working your way up without it being so intimidating and scary for you. The only real requirement is that you know how to write hiragana and katakana. But for you picking what you want to choose and taking it at a more approachable pace, the premium game is god tier. But the Kanken DS training is also good if you don't want that big package and you just want a more summarized version. And then finally we have Kageyama method, which is really nice for teaching hiragana and like correct writing and grading your handwriting skills. We have the Ukkari game here for teaching grammar and really more focusing on just language as a whole rather than teaching, you know, the Kanken. This is really good in the way that it approaches a whole bunch of stuff, because you learn names of food and fruits and animals, and you really learn Japanese almost like you're from the perspective of, you know, a kindergartner, and then you work your way up and learn all of the language. It's a really, really cool game, which I think a lot of people haven't ever heard of. And then finally, we have the Tanoshiku game here with Ichimaru, which is the most recent game in all of these. It's very polished, it's very fun, but it's just not necessarily the deepest experience. But it is definitely very appealing, very nice that it has voice acting. It is really fun, but just personally, I think my #1 recommendation would be the premium game. #2 would probably be the Kanken DS training. Both of those from IE Institute are my personal favorites. Then I probably enjoy Ukkari next, just because it teaches such an interesting spread of language, although Tanoshiku is probably similar on the same level, so I would put Tanoshiku or Ukkari somewhere between 3 and 4. And then my final recommendation, #5, would be the Kanken Training 2 for the 3DS. There really isn't too much of a difference between Kanken Training 1 and 2, so if you find a better deal for #1, feel free to get that. The only difference is Kanken Training 2 apparently has twice the number of example sentences, and it also has Ichimaru, the character that we just saw from the Tanoshiku series, which is a little bit annoying if you don't like the Ichimaru over and over again. You might sometimes hear his voice in Kanken Training 2 as well. Not too much, but just a little bit. So still, the Kanken Training games are really good. They're the ones I personally used, but I just find them a little bit annoying that I can't see exactly what I've studied and what I need to study. It's more just treated as a whole. So, what do you guys think about these games? Have you ever played any of them yourself personally? Did you find them useful? Even if you're not interested in learning the Kanken, I think these games can be really useful for helping you learn Japanese, getting more familiar with both the language as a whole, picking up vocab, learning more about sentence structure, increasing your reading ability, also getting that practice of looking at how sentences are broken apart. It's really nice how with a lot of these games, you actually get graded sentences, which is really useful for you because, so if you're starting from absolute zero, it's really nice to be able to kind of have all of the example sentences work around you, right? There is no kanji until you've learnt the kanji. That's really cool, right? And it helps you kind of get more into it. This is actually really useful if you think about it in graded material terms, because sure, there'll be a bunch of vocab that you don't know, but learning how to quickly look up vocab is a skill I think every Japanese learner needs to learn, because there's so much vocab to learn. So that's not too much of a problem. Looking up a quick word on a dictionary is not too difficult. So here, it's a really nice way to get used to the kanji and work your way up. The Rocket and Imagineer series games clearly have a lot more example sentences, but I think personally the IE Institute games are just a little bit better, a little bit more enjoyable for me personally. So what do you guys think? Have you guys tried out these games? Do you think they're good, bad? Do you think they'd help you in learning Japanese? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know what you guys think. I'll also be putting links in the video description for where you can get these games if you want to buy them from Amazon, for example. A lot of these games are still a little bit expensive if you buy them like brand new, they could still be anywhere from, you know, $10 to $40, some of the more newer ones. But one little quick bit of advice, a lot of these games you can buy for $5 secondhand on Amazon. Just pick the secondhand option and it's going to cost you more in shipping than it is to buy the game. Really cool stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully some of these games might be able to help you in your Japanese learning journey. Obviously you don't have to learn how to write kanji, but I personally find these just a really fun way of engaging with the language and being exposed to more native language, being exposed to language that kids in Japan would be expected to understand. And so that's something that perhaps you might want to, you know, test yourself and push yourself to learn. There is a ton of language that you're not going to pick up in the JLPT, a ton. And so it is really nice kind of looking at it more from a native perspective rather than a kind of outsider learning Japanese perspective. So thanks guys for watching. As always, a huge thank you to all the supporters on Patreon for supporting the channel. And if you want to join us on the Gengo Discord, then consider joining us on Patreon and come say hello. I'm probably around right now to chat if you ever want. We have a really cool community where we're all very friendly and like helping each other out, and we've been quite lucky in everyone being really chill, nice people. So if you want to come join us in the Discord and say hello, then please feel free. I'm always happy to say hi. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. See ya.